Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Volodymyr Liudvinovskyi. Yes, and I'm a senior system engineer at Dell Technologies. And today I will tell you about the Dell Data Protection Cyber Recovery offering that helps organizations across the world to recover a business after destructive cyber attacks. So our agenda for today is quite small, only three interesting points. I will talk about the challenges what we have on this field, about immutability, and why the data isolation and analysis is mandatory for protecting your most critical data copies. What the challenges do we have on this field? Basically, I guess it's obvious for anyone, cyber threats. Everyone knows about them. Some of you maybe already faced these challenges. Ransomware, encryption, data destruction, many of them. For bad actors, it's just a business, illegal, destructive, but profitable. And we should be able to address these challenges. So the number of threats are really huge. You can imagine all of this coming from the internet, like crime, like insider, like hackers, warfare. But for you as a customer or end user, it's not so important. It can be targeted, attacked by some hacker group, or it may be a case then everything just happened because you was exposed to some zero-day exploit, and ransomware was used this exploit across the world. The main thing for us is a result of this attack. Will you be able to recover your data after this attack or not? And in my opinion, the biggest threat here is the insider, because it is already in the middle of your company, potentially has access to data and can bypass standard protection mechanism. If I remember correctly, more than half of all attacks comes from with help of the insiders. Anyway, a good cyber recovery strategy takes all of this into account. We cannot just rely on the idea to pay ransom if something goes wrong. Yep, and the next problem, ransomware hackers targeting backup environment. They try to destroy your backup software, your backup storage, your user account that you use for protecting your assets. Their idea is clear. They want to destroy not just original data, but also your ability to recover this data. If you have no data and no backups, you will pay the ransom, or even worse, to lose the data. Sure, we can use, for example, tapes to store your data offsite, tapes by default offsite. But to be honest, I would envy anyone who rely on tapes during the recovery from cyber attack, because tapes too limited, too slow, no analytics, unpredictable result. Or we can try to use cloud, for example. But again, unpredictable performance, cost, especially cost for data transfer, can be huge. In cloud, analytics can be limited and expensive. And don't forget that internet connectivity is the first thing that company will disable in case of cyber attack. So how can we protect our data, and how can we guarantee the successful recovery in case of worst scenario? Then we lose all data, including the backups. And here we come to immutability. And this is supposed to be like logical answer for the threats related to data damage, like ransomware. And lots of vendors introduced this functionality quite recently. We have it for decades, but anyhow, ideally, immutability should allow you to make the data read-only, immutable to changes. But immutable does not mean invulnerable. Immutability is just a good part of any cyber resilience strategy, but it's implemented quite differently by vendors. So like Gartner says, it is important for you to understand what each vendor means by immutable and how this works. So how and why it is important to understand how immutability is implemented. Let's say you're implementing immutability on the storage level. Okay, so how the storage system is protected by itself? How is base operation system of the storage is protected? What if the attackers or hackers or insiders will I don't know, hack this system, hack the base operation system of the system, a storage system, and destroy the RAID or wipe the configuration? What if they use some zero-day exploit to access some firmware on this storage system and wipe the same config? Or another example, if you implementing software-defined immutability, basically the same story, because what if the attackers will use the vulnerability in the server? Let's say they use vulnerability in the remote management port and wipe the server config. What if the software that implement immutability is also vulnerable to some exploit because it's just a software? Sometimes we find some issues with software. And what if the insider is in your company and this insider can put USB flash into your immutable storage or immutable server? In the end, who is responsible to maintain this, like I said, do-it-yourself immutability? Who is responsible? IT admin, maybe network admin, maybe backup admin, maybe security team, who knows? Attackers will not follow the rules under which immutability works. They can always find another way on how to destroy your data, or at least make the data inaccessible. And this is possible just because even if something is claimed as immutable, in this scenario, it always exposed to attacks. Let's imagine the following scenario. Company has some services, different sites, even DR site for some protection against some threats. And of course, they have backup environment. And at some bad time, at some bad day, company was hit by ransomware. While you have a backup, you can recover your data. But what if data, including your backup, will be destroyed, I don't know, damaged, encrypted? What if hacker or virus or ransomware was able to delete the data that's supposed to be immutable? It's maybe it looks like almost impossible scenario, and some of you may say, "Oh, that cannot happen to me. I have everything protected." And my story, yeah, I was personally involved in the several post-attack recoveries, and believe me, the damage that can be caused by such attacks can be insane. Not just like a data loss, but also network device firmware corruption, destroyed hypervisor's operation system, wiped storage configuration, and many other unpleasant things. Anyway, you can check it by yourself. If you don't believe me, you can easily Google for many of stories describing the companies, well-known companies, rich companies with a big cybersecurity budget that was attacked, encrypted, and forced to pay ransom. And it's not necessary that everything will be encrypted like on this slide that you see on your screen. Just imagine like one of your most critical service, or maybe some data set, or maybe some files will be damaged or encrypted, and you don't have a backup. What will you do? So that's why we need isolation. That's the situation that immutability is just not enough. We need to somehow organize the process that make the data isolated from the production environment. Because again, immutability alone is just not enough. It's still it's a good part of any cyber resilience strategy, but without the vault, it will always be exposed to attacks. Always. Vault allows us to isolate the data. All the management, all the activities, control operation, everything is done from inside the vault. Simply put, to be able to manage the vault and access protected data, you need to be in the vault. You need to be physically in the vault. There is no way on how you can reach the data that isolated security within the vault environment. Yep, and that's what our solution offers. Isolation, immutability, and intelligence to protect most critical data copies. Isolation to physically and logically separate the data from the production. Immutability, of course, we have immutability to preserve integrity of the data, and intelligence to understand what's happening with protected data, find the signals of compromise, and bring information about last known good copy that you can use for recovery. And you can think about cyber recovery, about our offering as a separate rack within your data center, or maybe a separate room with the video surveillance, biometrical access, denying of single person access, all of these procedures that you can or want to implement to increase the security. And in our situation, we had a lot of customers that already implemented cyber recovery. Believe me, each customer is unique, and each customer always adding something from their side, like maybe some biometrical access, or someone will use even dedicated field or room, or maybe deploy this cyber recovery solution into another city or country. We have different cases. Anyhow, so how does it work? How the process looks like? On the first stage, we take your existing backups and transfer them via automated operational air gap into the vault. Basically, this is implemented by one direction security replica from the production environment to vault environment. Since this is an air gap, the link between your production environment and the vault environment is only available for the short period of time required to send the data. After the synchronization, the link is closed and vault is fully closed. This stage is responsible for isolation, basically. And the second stage you can see on the slide is maintaining of the copies that we can store in the vault, because we can easily configure how many of copies of our data we can leave in the vault and retain for some, compliance reasons. So we take this copy, and on the first stage, we make this data immutable within the vault to preserve the compliance rules and maintain additional security. So no one, even vault administrator, cannot delete the data. And the fourth stage, data that's stored in the vault is checked by software, by special software. I will talk about it later. For signals of compromise, we want to show, we always want to be sure that data is that's stored in our vault is in a good shape, not damaged, not encrypted, and can be used for recovery. And the last stage, of course, is the recovery, and if required, we have different options for recovery process. Yeah, here is an example of how data can be recovered from the vault. First one is a reverse replication, and it's like simplest way, allows us to send data back from the vault to the original storage and perform the recovery as usual by using your backup software, backup storage in your production environment. Second one is the automated recovery, but just by installing backup software within the vault, we can fully automate the recovery process directly from the vault. Next one, instant access. It can be used for many different purposes. It can serve different purposes. For example, most common scenario is to use this ability to test something within the vault, because look, you're running everything in isolated environment. You can easily test any workloads within the vault in the original state. You don't need to change IP. You don't need to change MAC address configuration. It's easy to maintain any test, not just for like VMs. You can basically test everything you want. And the most advanced type, it's called clean room, and it's for users who want to test their data before recovering to the production. Like imagine like clean room is a space in between the vault and the production, and the security team can use this clean room to additionally verify the data before pushing them into the production. It all depends on your paranoia level, in fact. And please note, in all cases, vault remains inaccessible from the production. Like you cannot control vault. You cannot send the command in the vault and get some result of this command. We maintain isolation even in case of recovery, and all recovery activities, all of these cases, as you can see, A, B, C, D, is initiated directly from the vault. In summary, cyber recovery vault is like segment or isolated part of your environment. It's not connected to production, and use automated air gap for data transfer. It's a only available single port of entry for data transfer. Everything is managed from the vault. Policies, schedules, recoveries, everything is accessible only from the vault management software. And sometimes we can use firewall or data diode to allow some messages about the vault state to external sources. Let's say you want to get the emails regarding the scanning or checking the data for bad things, or maybe your security team wants to get the syslog files. Again, this is optional, like firewall or data diode, but it's always nice to have it. Otherwise, you will be forced to check the vault state manually by visiting vault every single day. Remember, the vault is isolated, and by isolated, I mean truly isolated. Yeah, and the next one is a CyberSense, because CyberSense is one of the most critical part of our cyber recovery vault. It's running inside the vault, controlled by cyber recovery software. But if the cyber recovery is responsible for organization, the isolation, and immutability, then the CyberSense is responsible for data analysis. So we always know what data can be used for recovery. How CyberSense works? On the first stage, I call it the first stage, like we perform the full indexing of every single object that was transferred in the vault. Basically, we checked every single object within your backups, and we maintain the full history of changes for all objects to understand what is a normal behavior for each object. Like every single backup file within this backup has something like behavior, like change rate per day, and something like location, extension, and so on. So this system is just checking that what is normal for each object, and if something goes wrong, you will be notified about that. Next one, we check each object by more than 200 of different statistics to identify the possible corruption or encryption. It's not an antivirus. We don't have something like the base for update and something like that. We just use already like pre-installed specific statistic that can show us the potential signals of compromise. And we also use the machine learning that trained on the thousands of Trojans, attack vectors. It's like additional to identify the signals of compromise. And machine learning helps us to train the system on what is normal for your organization. Basically, more backups you will put in the vault, more backups will be checked, the more accurate will be system. And once anomaly is detected, you will get the report with list of suspicious objects. And this list can be used by security team just to provide additional verification. Yeah. And last but not least, we provide the post-attack forensic. This looks like detailed report about what was affected within all your backups, within all your servers. What was damaged, and most importantly for you, what backup set, what object you can use to recover the data. Basically, what object was not affected, and what object you can easily use to recover the data. Yeah, and an interesting point about the CyberSense, it's working in isolated environment in the vault. So basically, it's not connected to any external sources. We do not transfer anything outside for the scanning. CyberSense has a full content indexing that scans all the metadata, and at the same time, we scanning every single byte of the content of this file. Simply put, CyberSense is able to read backup data directly. When we scanning our data, we do not need to recover the data from the backups. CyberSense again is able to read backup data directly. Yeah, and the same time, CyberSense is checking every single byte. It is quite importantly, and why it's important. For example, if it scans database or maybe some files or VMDK files, then we can check everything, starting from the DB structure, like we checking the schema of the database, table spaces, and so on, and all the content of these table spaces and this database. And this allows us to identify not just like obvious threats like encryption, then the entropy spikes to 99%, but also identify more sophisticated threats like slow or partial encryption that may already run on the production but not visible yet. Yeah, and in summary, CyberSense is a part of our cyber recovery offering. It's I think most interesting and mandatory part of this cyber recovery vault offering. It allows us to scan all data, every single byte, to identify the things of compromise, to find that what's wrong with our data, detect anomalies, and changes that not typical of user behaviors. And most importantly, CyberSense will tell you which backup copy you can easily use to recover your data. And CyberSense with Cyber Recovery has its own user interface that use it to control all the vault operation. Nice and clean, HTML5, user-friendly. And please pay attention, this is not related to backups. Control over the vault can be done basically by any person, by any responsible person, but it's obvious that company cybersecurity team or department is the best choice here. Yeah, I guess it's obvious. Backup admins, it's not a cybersecurity specialist. Backup admin simply may not have all required knowledge. And in the end, backup admin is not responsible to maintain and develop cybersecurity procedures within the company. At the same time, cybersecurity teams has a little knowledge about the backup software, the backup and recovery procedures. So Cyber Recovery UI, our user interface, nice and clean, allows us to bridge this gap and gives the control to the right people. So the both teams, backup admins teams or IT department and security operations center of the company can work together on post-attack recovery. And why is the cyber recovery is the best solution? Let's try to answer this question. To be at a good level, what should solution provide? I guess at least integration, compliance log. Solution must secure data against unauthorized deletion. And you need immutability or worm, and by worm I mean that is required an attestation from third party that can be guaranteed by some SEC 17A or F standard. This is a minimum to be a good level. To be at better level, we need the protection from insiders, because basically most of the solutions have the capabilities to work against the basic garden variety of ransomware. But the ultimate test is when the solution can stand up against the insider, like IT administrator, backup administrator that have the full access to the system and potentially can destroy everything. Second one, to be better, we want the solution has the support for multiple backup software vendors. Many environments, maybe your environments, use more than one data protection technology, often from different vendors. Even if you use one vendor that serves you for data protection, maybe in the future you will decide to change this vendor. This should not change the protection rules. That's why, to be better, you need to support multiple backup software vendors. And to be the best, you need to provide some isolation, automated air gap. You need to provide full context learning or indexing, and to be able to identify the threats before the recovery. So when you need to start the recovery, you always should be prepared and know what data should be recovered. And quite good if you endorsed by someone, like in our case, we have the endorsement from the Sheltered Harbor. And this Sheltered Harbor is the non-profitable organization that brings like recommendation for insurance financial institution of many companies in the US. And we the only ones who was endorsed to build such solution for protecting the companies from cyber threat, even in worst case that everything, including the backups, was completely damaged or destroyed. And my last slide, we are not newbies in this technology. We started this solution in 2015 by the first isolated recovery solution with the custom deployment. A year ago, we also introduced this solution for cloud. First one, which was for AWS. Now we have for Azure and Google. Basically, we have this solution in the cloud just to provide cloud native workloads. So if customer want to have the vault in the cloud to protecting workloads that already runs in the cloud. And we have lots of the customers across the world. Yeah, many thousand, and we have different type of customers, from few terabytes to multiple petabytes of protected data in the world. Okay, so thank you. I guess time is running out.